the result of going through those 8 questions is that you become very clear on what your needs are in the relationship, what it looks like for the relationship to be thriving for you, both in and out of the bedroom.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Powerful Man Show. I am your co-host, Doug Holt, with the man himself, Tim, the Powerful Man Matthews. Tim, how's it going?
Very well.
Tim, what I wanted to talk about today was something that came up in a conversation that I've had, and you and I have seen this with a lot of men, and especially high-performing men, it seems to happen to as well, or at least they're willing to take down the mask, right, and talk about it. But it's being in a committed relationships, but it's a sexless relationship. Now, it doesn't start off that way. So the kind of the way this typically works, and those listening to us, maybe this lands for you, but they're in a relationship. They love their partner, married or not. They love the person they're with, but they haven't had sex in a long time. And by a long time, let's just say they're having sex less than once every 2 weeks. I'll call that a sexless relationship, but some people might be once every 6 months. And it's not unlikely for a lot of men, especially high-performing men in business, to be in these relationships where maybe they're having sex with their partner once every 3 months, once every 6 months. So the question that came up to us was, I'm in a sexless relationship. What do I do? So how would you respond to that?
Yeah, great question. I'd respond by saying, I have sex every day. I wear the mask and pretend. I'm human. I've been there. What do we recommend that the guys do? There's a few angles, isn't there? The first one, I'm going to mention the angles and then let's discuss them because I think you'll agree with me on this. The first angle isn't always the relationship, is it? Because you can be in a relationship with somebody and feel really attracted to them and really connected to them and have it all there, but just not have the energy to actually act on it because you're too exhausted and too burnt out by your business. So that's one of the angles, is to look at your business and look at your energy from there. Second angle, obviously, is you, the individual. You could have the business nailed down, the relationship nailed down, but for whatever reason, you could be lacking passion for life, which ultimately then filters into obviously lacking passion in other areas too. And then the third element that we definitely get to discuss and look at would then be the relationship, because maybe you thriving in business, you've got things positioned and running in a way whereby you've got freedom in your life and you're on fire there. And also you've got a lot of passion for life and you're happy and fulfilled. But the partner you're with, there's just some disconnect in the relationship. And in my opinion, it's definitely going to be one of those 3 things that you get to look at and dissect and lean into.
No, that's really fascinating and intense. And do you think that most of the men actually take the time to look at this, or do you think they run away out of fear?
If I'm totally honest, without judging, I think a lot of men, I'm thinking about the men we've worked with, and one of 2 things have typically happened. And often these men are in marriages. And do you know what? My initial response, Doug, was going to be that it leads to one of 2 things. They either cheat or they just ignore it. But in actual fact, a lot of the guys we tend to work with, Doug, don't actually tend to go and have affairs. Don't actually tend to go outside of the marriage. But what they will do is they'll just kind of run from it and they'll just ignore it and they'll just hide from it and turn often to porn, or they'll start to look at other women and fantasize about other women. And usually for a lot of the men, it then comes out in some other form. Some arguments or some disconnect in the relationship occurs. And even then, this often isn't spoken about. And worst case, sometimes the couples even end up getting divorced when it might not have had to get to that point if you, as the man, first and foremost, was willing to be vulnerable and surrender to the fact that, do you know what? This is a sexless relationship, and what can I do to change this? What can we do to change this? Because it's kind of it can be a little bit of a hit on the male ego, can't it? To actually realize and accept that, I'm not having any sex. And getting real with yourself about that can be quite a painful thing for some men. Not all men, just some men. And even those men that it's painful for, it doesn't make them wrong or bad or weak or anything. It's just where they're at.
So true. And in full transparency, which you and I share back and forth a lot, is I've been in this position as a married man, and I clearly identified the stages that you kind of go through, and what it looked like for my wife and I was very passionate, lovers, live together, work together, and you kind of, after a while, you stop doing those things. You swear you're never going to, but you stop doing those things that you did when you first got together, right? That's a common thread that I've seen around not only myself, from my standpoint, but also the men that we work with and talk to, is you turn in from this partner, this passionate love, to roommates, right? And you just kind of pass each other, and then it's kind of like, my roommate didn't do the dishes. These little things start to add up, and you guys sit on the couch and watch TV, and you start sedating yourself through, porn, but, TV, and get complacent. And then you go from roommates to just like friends. And then the next stage is you go back to kind of like roommates that aren't friends. And that kind of, you don't even want to have sex with your wife or your partner at that point. And they don't want to with you, because you've lost that passion, the dating aspect, where there's an aspect of chase and being chased. And those go both ways. Men tend to take the role of being the pursuer, right? But, a lot of men want to be pursued also, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it seems to be formulaic, right? That this stages start to happen. And within these stages, what I see with high-performing men is they tend to turn that energy and angst, that they have, and that kind of disassociation with their partner, they turn it towards business. They focus that energy and spend more and more time in their business, because it's something that they can move the needle in and get some significance. Because as you said, and I can testify to this, that when we entered this stage in our marriage, where it became this, basically just roommates for a little while, and I didn't want to have sex with my wife, frankly, what happened for me is I did feel lesser than. And I was able to, I took that energy of that lesser than and took it towards sports, being very competitive athlete, into sports, but then also into business, and being business as the sport, to channel that energy before I realized that I was in this cycle and figured out a way out. So it was really eye-opening for me to go through the whole process as well.
One of the things as well that came up for me as you were speaking then, Doug, I was again thinking about my own experience. And those stages of going from lovers to roommates to friends to roommates that don't like each other, one of the things that sometimes gets overlooked is if you're seeing your partner through that lens, then it's more often than not that you're also seeing yourself through a different lens too.
Yeah.
Because when you're single, what do? You work out, you want to look good, you want to look sharp, you want to be a good catch, don't you? So you're seeing yourself through that lens. So then when you get with your partner, you're also seeing her through that lens too. But then obviously things happen, maybe complacencies and habits creep in, and you start to, first of all, see yourself differently without even kind of realizing it sometimes. And then ultimately, obviously, seeing her differently too, because it's very difficult for you to look at somebody and see them differently to how you typically would look at yourself and see yourself, But yeah, I totally relate as well with then channeling that energy into business and just hiding out there because it's easy. And then what we'll do, what I have done in the past is and work harder and work longer. So then you don't really make excuses about the fact, don't you, that, I'm just too tired to have sex, or there's just not enough room in the day to have sex, or you kind of find ways and reasons for why it's acceptable because you are, you're over there, you're busy making money and she's just busy and, you're just both busy. But the reality is that, there's something deeper there. And, for me, so now what we've kind of covered, if we think about those three areas that I mentioned at the beginning, we've started to talk about business a little bit there, haven't we? But if I was to shift it a little bit and shift this conversation a little bit, one of the things that has been true for me is that my needs, my sexual desires have changed during the time that I've then been with my partner. And I don't just want to have the same old boring sex. I just don't, and that's not that I don't love her or whatever. But what is it that excites you about the fact of, when you first sleep with your wife or someone new, or, even when, why do people have affairs? Sometimes, it's not the only reason, but sometimes it's that thrill of the chase, it's the excitement, it's the passion, it's the newness, it's that energy, isn't it? So it then becomes a case of, well, how can you then create that energy with your wife and your partner? Is it that you start to have some time apart and you start to just date one another again? And, kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent here with what I'm about to say, but I can't remember which celebrity or business person or whoever, I can't remember who it was, but I remember reading an interview from this person who was very happily married, very happily married for however many decades, and he actually had his own house. They had a house in which the married couple lived, but they also had a separate house that either of them could retreat to and go and stay some days on their own and, whatever. But that obviously then created the space, didn't it? It creates the space, and maybe you can then use that to kind of feel like he's still dating one another. There's still some freshness and some newness to the relationship. But yeah, for me, one of the big things is to be able to discuss when my sexual desires change and be able to do that and then find a way to have my needs be met. Because in all honesty, Doug, if I was to end the relationship with Amelia, thinking, that sex was the issue, and then go into a new relationship with another woman, I'd probably encounter the same thing after a certain time frame, because I'd be reliant on that, just being the surface level of the new connection, the new energy to be the thing that'd get me through in the short term. But ultimately, however many months in or years in, I'd come up against the same upper limit. So yeah, it's such a key part in my opinion. And to be honest, it's something that I'm still learning, always learning how to navigate, is how to express those new desires and then have them be met.
Yeah, I agree with you. And again, this is one of those things where you and I could go off for hours. But, one of the things you talked about was how our sexual desires change. And I think this is a tangent, but an important one to cover. Because there's really three types of sex that we have as couples, right? We have what's called friction sex. And this is what experts have boiled it down to. So there's not my own terms, but, as always, learning from other people. Friction sex is contact sex, right? It feels good. You relieve stress, you relieve tension, and we all have that. It builds up and, you just feel that good release. Within that stage of friction sex, the first stage, you always need variety. Right? You always need to change things up. We need sex toys. We need other partners. We need all kinds of fantasies, right? Because there needs the release. The second stage that people fall into after friction sex is validation sex, right? And this is where couples have been there for a while. And, I need to validate by, if I don't having sex, I need to validate that I'm good enough, right? Connecting with my partner to seek validation, right? That's the next sex. Or sex driven by anxiety is another common one with business people. Because it always comes with a demand on the relationship. Like, this is what I'm needing to fulfill during this sex act. I need to feel connected to you. I need to feel that, you love me, that I'm validated, that I'm a good enough man, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the third stage is the stage we're all really wanting to get to. Trust me, the friction sex is where we think we want to be, but it's really the third. And there's a place for all of these a little bit. But the third is connected sex. It's that feeling of openness, tenderness, kind of erotic feeling where what we're connecting to is our own desire rather than just our partners. It's that kind of sex you have with your eyes wide open. The lights can still be on and that's okay. We don't have to do this in the bedroom with the curtains drawn and everything else, but you're opening, you're connecting, and you're communicating, consciously or it's not consciously, but verbally or not verbally, you're communicating what's going on for you with your partner. It's just a very safe space to be risky. And what I mean by that is you're peeling back the layers and you're showing who you really are, right? You're showing your vulnerabilities. And through vulnerabilities and stories, right? That's how we connect. We think that we connect in different ways, but it's really the vulnerabilities that we share with each other that allow us to go to that deeper level. And that connected sex, that connected sex is that sex that what I've talked to when I seek out people in my life that have been in long-term marriages that have been, kind of role models for my wife and I. And that's something we actively actually seek out, are these role models that are down the path further. This is where they stay. This is their sweet spot, where they share things, and not outside the bedroom, but they also share them in the bedroom. And by being open and vulnerable, it's always changing. So you get that freshness, you get that newness without what we think of the friction sex, where you have to bring in toys and everything else. Now you can bring them in with connected sex. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's the 3 levels of progression in the relationship, in a sexual relationship. And oftentimes what happens to married couples is you get complacent, either one person or both people. And I know, talking to women, as I've gone through all this relationship coaching and things like that, they often complain that the man becomes complacent. I got her. Cool. Now I'm going to get fat. I got her. Now I'm not going to work out anymore, to your point. Because you think, hey, I got the person. Now I no longer have to do those things that I did when we were just dating, when it was easy for her just to leave. Now she's here. I've caught her. And you start going back to, really validation sex or friction sex, where you're just doing it, right? You're just having sex to get off. Essentially, it's masturbation with a partner is the way that I would describe it. And getting through those 3 levels is really the important to say, hey, where am I now in my relationship? Where am I honestly now? Am I having friction sex? And I'm thinking, okay, we got to try these 30 different positions before I have an orgasm. Or am I having validation sex? And let's be real, a lot of us go through that validation thing where if we're in a sexless relationship, we want to have sex just to even be validated that this relationship still has connection. And then the third, again, is that true connected sex. And how do you get there? And so, Tim, I think that's something that's so often overlooked, because for some reason in our society, Western culture, we just assume sex is something everybody knows. Like, oh yeah, this is something that you just know how to do, and people don't talk about it. And it's an odd thing to me that we assume that everybody's born an expert in the subject area. And for some reason, this puritanic culture almost, it's just not something that is talked about openly and honestly, and people hide behind it.
Hey guys, I had to interrupt this show because I want to talk to you about a case study we put together. It's only 11 minutes, and what we do is we go over and show you how almost 300 men have taken control of their life, have already 4x'd their business revenue, and are having more connected and intimate sex with their partner using the activation method. And they're doing all of this without burning down their relationships and without suffering and sacrificing their health. We want you to have this too. So go over to thepowerfulman.com/11, the number 11, 11, and get this right now. It's only 11 minutes, and it's going to show you exactly how these men have done it. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Where I was brought up, and in the UK especially, is very PC and it's very suppressed. And if you look at it now, I mean, Amelia and I were sat on the sofa the other night watching this dating show, and it was so bizarre because it was basically showing lots of different men and women and what their journey was like in today's dating world with the dating apps. And obviously, there's such a disposable mentality around people and around sex and around relationships. I'm just going to swipe. I don't like you. Swipe, 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 swipe. And we're discussing about what it would be like to be single right now. Because I was in a relationship for 6 or 7 years, came out of that. I was obviously engaged to get married then and called it all off. Came out of that. And then within, 12 months, I'd then met Amelia. And yeah, I went on dating apps a little bit in that time, but I'd really immersed myself in work and I wanted to be on my own. So really, I went on dating apps at like 10 o'clock at night when I got into bed to just kill, 15 minutes to just switch off, to be honest. And that was really before they were really getting, like, picking up pace. And the thought of being single now and what it would be like, and the mentality of sex and dating and relationships is really quite scary and interesting at the same time. And I think inevitably it boils over into how we then show up in our relationship, or it can boil over into how we show up in our relationship and what we expect from our partner and from sex, especially with, how women are portrayed in the media as well, whether it's social media, whether it's Instagram, all these different things where all you're doing is seeing women that are, airbrushed or this or that. It warps your reality of what it does for me anyway. It warps my reality of what I then ought to expect. And if it can be quite easy, in my opinion, to then take that level of expectation into the relationship and also filter your sex life through that lens too, especially when you don't have the knowledge and the awareness around what you just spoke about, Doug, the types of sex, combined then with, as men, how we taught to suppress our emotion and hide it and, not speak our voice. And we kind of then, form all these judgments and make all these decisions without really gathering much information or speaking our voice. Or we can anyway.
So true. So taking this full circle back to kind of the original guys that we were talking about, and we've had conversations, and really, myself, 6 years ago, maybe at this point, something along those lines. So to a man who is listening to this, or, a woman who, because we do get that, we get women that reach out to us because they want their husband to go through the Powerful Man, or their partner to go through the Powerful Man program. But to somebody listening to this that's in a sexless relationship, what would you say, and I'll share my opinion, but what would you say are kind of the first three or, so action steps that they could be taking to move forward?
So I'm going to use what we actually teach in the activation method, because I think it's so true. So the first one would be to understand what your needs are. Because often, we ask the guys, don't we, in the activation method, well, your needs be met. And it's kind of like a blank stare often on their face, which, again, it doesn't make them wrong or anything. It's just where they're at. And that blank stare comes from them not actually knowing what their needs are. So how do you then become aware of what your needs are? Well, the 8 compass questions, I think, are a great place to start. And that's where you and your partner both answer 8 questions. And I'm not going to go through them all right now, but basically the result of going through those 8 questions is that you become very clear on what your needs are in the relationship, what it looks like for the relationship to be thriving for you, both in and out of the bedroom, because ultimately it's only going to thrive in the bedroom if it's also thriving outside of the bedroom too. And the second thing I would then say is the evening breakdown. So how that works is it's 4 questions that you would go through at the end of the day, ideally over dinner. And those 4 questions basically create a space whereby you can ask and bring up any ways in which you may have annoyed one another in the day. You then check in on each other's wins for the day, your goals, and basically asking the question that, if every day was like this, would we be living our life to the fullest? That isn't the exact wording, but basically the outcome of it really allows each person to be seen, heard, and appreciated, and clears the air, which again goes to that solid connection. And then the third one is to always be speaking everything that you think and feel, which I know you might be thinking, what? Surely I don't want to be speaking everything that I think and feel, but it's really key to be able to communicate authentically to the woman that's in your life so that you can, again, not be holding anything back, but also be able to create a space whereby there's no resentment, there's no guilt, there's no shame, because all of these things will just block up the relationship and disconnect you and her. And of course, you get to communicate in a way whereby you're not being a victim, you're not blaming anyone, and you're not pointing a finger. Quite the opposite, taking total ownership for what you feel and how things are going on. Otherwise, if you don't do that, then things will build up, they will boil over, and arguments will ensue, and that's where you tend to move from the whole, well, you tend to start to become roommates, and then roommates that don't even enjoy living together.
I love that. And I think those are great action steps that can go right away. And we've seen them work with countless men. One of my favorites is personally, that my wife and I use is the nightly check-in, right? Or check-out, depending on what you want to say. But that connection time at the end of the evening just to discuss and open-ended questions even, like, how was your day? Like, what happened? Because again, we've talked about this, but I see it as a common thread that all too often as we grow as people, as men, or as humans in general, we forget that our partner's also growing and is also changing and evolving. And their thoughts, their dreams, their fears, their desires are changing. And unless we ask them, oftentimes we just don't know. We assume that the person that we started dating, 6 years ago, 3 years ago, 6 months ago is the same. And it's just not true. At least, you hope it's not true, right? You hope that as you're growing, and anybody that's listening to this show is on a path of growth, right? On somewhere in their journey, that their partner also is growing. And if they're not, then, that's a sad thing. But you don't know unless you ask and have those conversations. And I think that's so true. And in the activation method, going through that with the men, we see a huge change, not only in their business, right, but in their relationships. And there's so many people that talk about this, that how your business and your money and your finance is closely tied in to your intimacy and the level of intimacy you share with somebody else. And I've seen it time and time again. And I'm not sure if you have, Tim, but I've certainly seen it where when men up-level the level of intimacy they have with their partners. Now, this could be with women, this could be with another man, this could be with anything, right? But that level of intimacy that they're having with a partner coincides with their success in so many different areas. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, for sure. Certainly. It's just an absolute catalyst, isn't it? Because, when you're able to be intimate, by default, you've been vulnerable. And when you're able to be vulnerable, by default, there's no mask. And when you're able to take off the mask, then what happens in business is you go after, or rather allow yourself to create your biggest and best ideas. You're a much calmer leader. You communicate in a much more grounded manner to your team. There's so many ways in which I could go on and talk about this, but yeah, it's so true.
Absolutely. So it's often an area that causes the most pain for us, yet we tend to hide from it, right? We don't look at it. We look towards business. We look towards our health, right? We can get on a scale and look at the weight and adjust it. But for some reason, and the reason being is because it scares us the most, because it's the most precious, we hide from relationships. And we don't talk about them, right? It's not cool to talk about, hey, I'm having problems in my marriage or with my partner. We'd rather talk about, hey, it's okay to talk about problems in your business. It's okay to talk about weight. It's okay for men to talk about all these other things. But when it comes to their intimate relationships, for some reason in our society, it's not okay to discuss it or talk about it. So therefore, as men, we're stifled and we have to hide. And that is something that just needs to change. So Tim, in wrapping up here, because we're coming to time and we'll have many conversations about this, and I encourage the men to jump in to the activation method group and discuss some of these things that are coming up, and we'll bring them to the table as well. But coming to an end, you've given us takeaways to start right away through the activation method, things that are being taught currently. If a guy's listening to this right here, right now, what's the one thing they need to do?
Come clean.
Boom. Simple and powerful, man. Well done.
True, isn't it? Come clean about where you're at and what's going on and how you're showing up. Because unless you do that, for as long as you want to choose to lie and deny and avoid and run from, you'll continue to lie and deny and avoid and run from. So just come clean. It doesn't make you good or wrong or bad or weak, whatever. Where you're at is where you're at. Just come clean.
There it is. Come clean, guys. It is the scariest thing for many of us to come clean, to take off the mask, so to speak, and expose who we are as men. But as I describe it often, and Tim, I know you do too, to me, the definition of a real man is stepping into that fear. And most of the powerful men that we know, in fact, all the powerful men we know, have conquered that fear and step into it regularly. Now you step back into it. So, gentlemen, as you're out there listening to this, and Tim and I just having this discourse and sharing this conversation with you, and you're involved in this as you're listening to this. There's three of us here. Is coming clean. Be honest with yourself. Be raw and honest with yourself first, and then find a tribe of men who are growing as well, right? And we encourage you to go. Obviously, the reason the Powerful Man was started was to create this conversation, this place where men like you could go to have conversations that matter, take off the mask without judgment, and actually, grow together and step into your power, step into that life that you deserve, that is there waiting for you. It's your calling to claim it, and that's all you have to do. So, Tim, as always, great talking to you, and I'm sure you and I will throw some jabs left and right at each other jokingly at the end of this. But thank you again for so much information and sharing all that you have here. And we'll talk again on the next episode.
Awesome. Bring it on.